My name is Rachel Sheffelmiar. I'm a registered nurse and an injured worker recovering from an occupational stress injury, which means my job caused a psychological injury. I would like to talk about presumptive legislation. So WCB will provide coverage for psychological injury for employees not included in presumptive legislation, but only if the injury fits their narrow definition, or you can make a case that fits the definition. You must prove that your illness is work-related. This means reliving your trauma over and over and over again. Navigating the current system is difficult and stressful, especially if you're not well mentally. I know of nurses who were denied claims simply because they couldn't articulate themselves or they didn't want to tell and retell their stories, to be subjected to outsiders' opinions of routine job demands or the stigma, shame, and embarrassment of being seen as less than or weak. If your claim is accepted by WCB, it's a game changer in recovery. You can focus on healing because you are not suffering a loss of pay, your treatments are fully covered, and you aren't using up all your sick hours. Without a WCB claim, many nurses have found themselves having returned to work before they were ready and often without accessing any treatment. So presumptive legislation, what does that mean? WCB provides presumptive traumatic psychological injury coverage for workers employed in specific jobs. This means that if you meet the certain criteria and you're diagnosed with a psychological condition following exposure to a traumatic event at work, WCB will presume the diagnosis is related to work unless proven otherwise. Who are included? First responders, firefighters, EMS, police, correctional officers, and emergency dispatchers are routinely exposed to traumatic events at work as part of their normal job expectations. The traumatic events may be life-threatening, very disturbing, or stressful, and can result in symptoms that are debilitating and require treatment to resolve. Yes, being exposed to traumatic events on a routine basis can result in symptoms that are debilitating and require treatment to resolve. I know this from personal experience. Nurses are not included in this definition. Even though we are routinely exposed to traumatic events, our work is extremely difficult and traumatic, especially over the last 2 years. Maybe those who decide who is eligible under presumptive legislation need to spend a day as a nurse during a global pandemic and see for themselves. Let me take you into one of my days that happened almost a year ago, during the height of the third wave. I was overwhelmed with my workload and my job satisfaction was at its lowest. Each day felt more and more impossible. There was more work to do than time, so I was working on my time off to catch up. My patients and families were upset about the care insufficiencies and dwindling resources due to the ongoing pandemic. Verbal threats and aggressions occurred nearly daily to several times a day. The message was, do the best you can, and we're all in this together. But if you didn't meet all the demands, there could be harsh reprimands or worse, humiliation. I adjusted by pushing through and overriding my own physical and psychological needs. I was not sleeping or eating, having difficulty concentrating and making decisions, and experiencing daily migraine headaches. I felt physically unwell and mentally numb. Then I experienced a traumatic event at work. It was one of those moments where I was there in body, but it was like I was watching it happen to someone else. I couldn't process it. So I put it out of my mind and continued my shift. Over the next couple of days, the warning signals my body tried to send and I failed to acknowledge escalated to total shutdown. I remember driving and imagining how I could end my suffering permanently. I couldn't see any other way out. I not only broke, but I shattered. In the aftermath, I've worked very hard to put the pieces back together, but I am changed forever. The failure to recognize and manage the psychological and physical strain experienced by the nurses working under the very difficult conditions created by the COVID pandemic is destroying nurses. Many nurses are experiencing burnout and health stress. This isn't just a bad day. It's panic attacks, depression, anxiety, PTSD, adjustment disorder, self-medicating with substance, suicidal ideations and/or actions. Nurses are dying of suicide and overdoses. We are mourning the loss of them today. Trauma slowly eats away at you until it breaks you. It fractures your entire sense of being and self-confidence. Rendered incapable, existing in the world but detached, immobilized, and emotionally gutted. Protective members of society, now dependent. I am a mother of 4 children. I am a daughter, a sister, a wife, a friend, and a voice for those without a voice. I have people in my life that love me and rely on me. I am more than my job as a nurse. No job is worth your life. Therefore, I seriously considered leaving the profession after my injury. Thankfully, I had mentors in my corner who supported and guided me through the process. I joined 2 nurse peer support groups, a couple of them are behind me right there, and met weekly with nurses experiencing similar stories of moral distress and burnout. They provided the gift of understanding without me having to explain a word, and held space for the difficult emotions: anger, grief, pain, sorrow, shame, guilt, regret. I am back at work, and the situation and the working conditions haven't really changed. I say this as we're in a 6th wave, but I have a greater window of tolerance, and I have the support system and tools to remain successful. Since being treated for my trauma, it does not follow me, and it does not weigh me down. I have more capacity than ever before. I'm engaged at work, I'm creative, motivated, and efficient. Through my role as a union advocate, I am now become a support system and system navigator for other nurses struggling with occupational stress injuries. I know what it feels to be lost and not know how to find yourself again. It's been said that we are in the midst of a massive nursing resignation and mental health crisis. How are we going to improve the culture to have new graduates stay and have others want to even become a nurse? Imagine the cost of sick time, high turnover, and training of new nurses if we continue to be reactive instead of proactive. How can we save our nurses from leaving the profession, losing their livelihood, or even worse, dying? We need equity. Registered nurses, RPNs, LPNs, HCAs, included in presumptive legislation. We need a roadmap for care, such as the traumatic psychological impacts care model that is being used for other first responders. We need our workplaces to implement and practice the national standard for psychological health and safety. We need peer support wellness program that is nurse peer-led, so to engage with our peers early to prevent, mitigate, and walk with our peers to navigate recovery. We need timely trauma and evidence-informed treatment, and we need to expedite treatment so that injured nurses are not spending 1 to 2 months or longer of their recovery proving that they're injured and their injury occurred because of the traumatic nature of their work. Early interventions equals better outcomes. The impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic have highlighted the urgent need for entrenched worker protections. Workers around the world cannot wait a moment for this to be a priority for governments and employers alike. It is no surprise that so many of us are experiencing the same symptoms in nursing. We are human beings after all, not superheroes. Nor do we ever want to be seen as such. Who is going to care for the caregivers? Are we disposable and replaceable? I'd like to think not. Thank you.